Hello everyone, my name is Azurius and welcome back to Space Engineer Survival. Before we begin, I just want to apologize for not having this video up sooner. I ran into some issues with one of my editing programs while trying to get this video done and spent about 3 days troubleshooting it, trying to get it to work, and another day reinstalling Windows, trying to get everything set up, since I didn't have a disk image that my programs would work on. But I've gotten everything sorted out now, and we're in working order, so hopefully there'll be less time between videos now. Jumping back to Space Engineers now though, we're going to see that this episode is a lot of running around searching for resources, mainly uranium. I realized after the last episode that the assembler requires a bit more power than my batteries can hold to make it through the night. During the day, we operate alright, and we're able to run both the refinery and assembler just fine. So I'm prioritizing uranium so that I can run things throughout the night, even when we don't have battery power to operate off of, and then during the day, we'll try to operate solely off of solar power. I still have the goal of setting up a large solar farm to try and power a base and machinery once we get set up. I guess I should mention that I do have a few mods that I'm using. I do have them listed in the description, and I'll try to get links to them added for you guys in case you want to check them out. For the time being, I'm trying not to use too many mods. Most of what I have in the game currently is just tweaks to how the game functions or the addition of new mechanics. I do have a couple of new blocks added, and I may try introducing some other mods as the game progresses, but for now, you can check in the description to see what I'm using at this point in time. One mod that I would like to highlight is the PowerFix mod. PowerFix prioritizes using input from solar panels instead of using it from the reactors first. I would highly recommend this mod even if you're wanting to stay vanilla, as it's a very simple tweak that will save you a lot of uranium that would otherwise be spent pointlessly. Now, as you probably noticed already in the video, I've been gathering some resources as I come across them in those handy, easy to find boulders. We got a lot of iron in the last video that will hold us over for a while, but I wanted to stock up on some of the other resources I know we're going to need before we expand. For these materials, I really didn't invest a lot of time to mine them out completely. I just wanted enough in the case that I might need a few extra parts, as we can always come back and finish them later. Now, I was hoping to find uranium in one of the rocks, though I'm not sure that that's even possible. From what I've seen at this point, it's not, but to be fair, we haven't seen it anywhere else. I guess it's true that it's a rare resource on the Earth-like planet. One great thing about running around looking for all these resources is that it's really given me a chance to test the rover and see how it performs. The rover did pretty well, handling most of the hills pretty easily. I ended up setting a speed limit on it though, as going much above 90 tended to cause it to wiggle back and forth a lot, even on smooth surfaces like the ice lake. Of course, my ultimate fear with it wiggling like that is that I would lose control and it would flip. I did come close to flipping it a few times throughout my experience with it, but luckily I was able to recover and no damage was caused to the rover. I did find one flaw with it that I feel made it not as functional as I had hoped: high centering. I gave the vehicle 6 wheels so that I could avoid high centering, and that's worked to an extent. The problem is the vehicle is too wide, and while going over some of the smaller hills or more rugged terrain, the bottom of the vehicle will catch. My only other gripe came down to a matter of lighting, but I remedied the issue by adding lights in all 4 directions to make sure that I can see around me. It kind of helps, but due to some lighting bugs and the light shining in a somewhat narrow cone, it doesn't really give us as much light as I feel it should, but it's better than nothing, and hopefully soon we'll be spending our nights building instead of looking for resources. Now, I scoured around the lake, stopping at every rock and dark patch that I could find, but unfortunately, I still didn't find any uranium. That being the case, I decided to drop off what I've gathered, make a save, and head out on an expedition with the rover. I set out just as the sun was starting to shine over the mountains so that I would have as much daylight as possible to explore with. I went off in the direction that we actually flew from when we were coming in to land at this ice lake. It didn't take too long before I started to encounter some obstacles in the form of steep or rugged terrain, but I took my time and explored a little on foot to find the safest route. Luckily, I really only had to do this once, so it wasn't a big issue. I found a pretty large snowy plains-like area that I explored a bit, enjoying the small hills, but I gave up searching after many of the rocks and dark patches didn't yield any uranium. I actually went on a very long trip following the winding of the mountains, so that I didn't lose my way. At one point, I found myself at an impasse though, so I decided to call it, and I headed back empty-handed. I've left out the return trip as it wasn't eventful in the slightest. I didn't even stop to gather resources. I just wanted to make it back and move on to another idea. That idea being finding a desert. So, first things first, I needed a way to bring the rover with us. I thought about just using the connector on the Planetary Lander, but I was worried that I would damage the wheels since the connector caused the rover to hit the ramp into the ship. So after ruling that out, I decided to try and lock it with one of the landing gears and hoped that I didn't encounter a bug that would cause me to drop the rover. Luckily, nothing like that happened during the trip. I took off in the same direction that I had just explored with the rover, as I knew from our descent to the planet that there was a desert in that general direction. I tried to keep relatively low to the ground to save on energy, since at this point I was flying solely on batteries. As the sun rose though, being that I was heading towards its rise, I was able to operate mostly off of solar panels for flight, giving me a prolonged flight time. Eventually I made it to the desert, and after a quick survey, spotted quite a few dark patches, so I set myself down near them. One thing I didn't take into account is that since I landed between some cliffs, I don't get quite as much sun, but I still feel like I'm getting more than when I was at the ice lake, so that's a nice bonus. I'm definitely going to build a base here though, as I think this will be a great spot for a solar farm. Now of course, the main reason for my coming here was to see if it's true that deserts have uranium more frequently. Well, after checking 3 or 4 dark spots, I finally found it. It was a ways down beneath some silicon. It took a little while, and I had to move quite a bit of rock, but eventually I got down to it. I dug a spiral tunnel instead of digging straight down, which made it take a bit longer, but I didn't want to run the risk of running out of hydrogen and getting stuck down there. I think it was the right move, and I still used a fair amount of hydrogen even during the little bit that I touched it, though I believe that probably had to do with using it when I had a full inventory of materials. Anyway, now that I've found uranium, I can focus a little more on the other things that I need to. Our first project is going to be a redesign of the Rover. It served its purpose and allowed me to test how the wheels work under gravity and find some design flaws. I think the next vehicle is going to take on a more varied role. I was thinking of doing a modular Rover, almost like a flatbed truck. We'll see how it turns out and what direction I end up going with it, but I think the idea I have in mind is going to simplify things quite a bit for us. Once I get that built out, I'm going to work on a drill apparatus. Being that the Rover is going to be modular, maybe I can fit it to work with the Rover, or maybe it will be its own machine. Again, we'll see how it turns out, but I think those are going to be the two things I focus on, and then I may move to setting up the basics for a solar farm. Well, that's it for this episode, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.